Welcome back to Novita's YouTube knitting workshop for absolute beginners. This is the 5th episode and today we are talking about stockinette stitch. My name is Sari.
My name is Marcus and this is the part of knitting or of any knitting project that I really love, because from here on it's just plain knitting, just round and round and round, and you can let your thoughts wander wherever, or you can watch TV or you can sit with a friend and talk. You can't eat at the same time, but that's about it. It's a zen moment of knitting, I'd say.
Yes, that's true. And first of all, I'm going to change to the larger needles at this point. So the ribbing was made with smaller needles, and I'm taking the 10mm needles and continuing with them. And as Marcus already said, we are just going to knit, so no purling from now on. No. Only knitting until the end of the hat, so it's really fun.
Smooth sailing, yeah. And we're changing the needles, the needle size with double pointed needles. You'll be working the same way you would with the 8mm needles, only that when you finish a row or finish a needle, you put the smaller needle aside, take the thicker needle instead and continue knitting with that one. So it's nothing harder than that.
And we already mentioned that we are knitting the Nordic style, so this is the continental way of knitting. And why should you learn how to knit the continental style? This is faster than the English style. It's also the movement that you make while knitting is much smaller, so you don't have to take your hands off the needles or throw the yarn around as much as with English style, so it's easier for your joints as well.
Yeah, and we know it might be hard to take on a new knitting technique. If you already know the English way of knitting, it's sort of hard. It's like turning left-handed all of a sudden, but it can be done, and we really encourage you to try, because you might find it very much easier than the English style.
Yes.
Now, here's a great opportunity to modify your hat one more time. So now you finish with the ribbing, and it's the length you chose. And the next thing is, of course, how long the stockinette part will be.
So that's another thing that you can change about the hat. So just keep knitting until you have the perfect length for your head or your style. Just leave enough for the decreases, the top shaping of the hat. And another thing that you can do at this point is decide whether you prefer the stockinette stitch side of the hat or the reverse stockinette stitch. Also, this looks really nice. Usually with knitting you talk about the right side of the project or the wrong side, but actually neither of them is the wrong side.
No, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, this is the pearl side of the hat, the reverse stockinette. And if you prefer this side, this is also a great way to modify your hat. So you can just put this side on top of the hat and wear it like that if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, and if you can't decide yet, you have all the time in the world. Yeah. This is not decision time in that sense. That comes a bit later on. Okay, but like we said, this is smooth sailing and easy going. But at some point you will want to know how much you've knitted, and whether you should, or maybe in another project, whether you should start with a knit stitch or purl stitch. If you put your project aside and pick it up again, and at that point, at the latest, it's good to learn some basic stitch reading. And by stitch reading, I mean looking at the stitches on the needles and looking from there, seeing whether you're having knit stitches or purl stitches. So they look a bit different. Now these are all knit stitches, and you can see they form these V-shaped loops here. So each V is a stitch, and this is the knit stitch. And if we take a look inside, you'll see there's a little yarn. What would you call this?
A dash?
Yeah, or like a little yarn dash going in front of the stitch from the purl side. So that's how you tell the difference. And if you're knitting something with both knit and purl stitches, you can easily count them and sort of read the knitting by looking at the stitches. So that's a useful skill.
And each stitch forms their own row. So we have these little leather V's on top of each other, and each V is another round. So if you need to count how many rounds you have made already, you just count the number of these little V letters on top of each other, and that's our row or round count.
Yeah. If you have a lot of rows and you don't feel like counting, or if you have a very thin yarn, you might want to use a stitch marker and put it there every say 10 rows. So that way you don't have to start over from the beginning each time you need to count your rows. So stitch marker, either one of plastic or just a yarn, a piece of yarn will do as a stitch marker. So that's one way to get along.
What's your favorite thing about knitting?
My favorite thing, I think it's just a perfect way to calm down or relax. That's I think how I started knitting. I didn't think about it that way, but it was actually as a way to relax and as something opposed to quite a stressful work at that time. So that's what motivated me, I think, and it still does. How about you?
I like being creative. I like being able to design new things. Of course, I'm a designer, but come up with new things. And as we have already discussed, even with the basic skills, you can start modifying your own project. You can make longer ribbings, different kinds of ribbings, and just like that, you are also a designer. So that's something that I love about knitting. Another thing that I love is always learning something new. This is like constant learning. There's always a new technique that you can learn and a new yarn that you can use. Different yarns have different characteristics, and
and you know, by extension, the fun thing about knitting is it's so versatile. You can shape it. You can shape your hobby and your craft in any direction you want. Actually, there's no absolute no-nos and no absolute directions about how to go about it. And you can also decide for yourself how hard you want to make it. I mean, sometimes you just want to make really simple projects, just to keep your hands busy, and so and sometimes it's something really hard, and you really have to concentrate and count and keep your stitches in order. So, but you can adjust that yourself by choosing different kinds of projects. And also, I mean, there are people who learn to knit socks and never knit anything else in their lives, and that's fine as well. Yeah. And then there are the more explorative ones that always want to learn something new and try on different techniques, but you don't have to do that either. So that's really wonderful about knitting. It takes every knitter in a little different direction. Yeah. So it really feels like your own hobby.
And one of the main reasons I love knitting is the community of knitters. I have made a lot of really good friends and met so many wonderful people through knitting, with all knitting events and meetings and so on. So that's another aspect of knitting.
Yeah, plus the online communities, of course. Yeah. There's Ravelry, that's worldwide. And we also have at Novita Knits a community of our own. It's called Knittery, with over 100,000 active knitters. Yeah. So once you finish your project hat and sign on to Novita Knits, you're very much welcome to Knittery as well and see what other knitters are doing there. Okay, so on with the stockinette and on to the next part where we start shaping our hat, because if you just keep going like this, we'll be making a giant tube and we'll want to make a hat, so it needs some shaping, and that's the topic for the next episode.
So next episode is about the decreases that form the hat.
Yeah, we'll see you there.